All right. Welcome everyone. I'm Lauren Figueroa. I'm just checking in here with Derek at ShowSpan to make sure that we are live and that everything is working. So Derek, if you can hear me, give me a signal and I will get going in just a minute here. So y'all can just hang out with me here while I awkwardly wait for a sign. Oh, I see some people chiming in. Oh, Carolyn, you said you could see me. Okay, perfect. If Carolyn can see me, then I am going to go ahead and go live here. Go live. I'm already live, but get going with the seminar. So welcome. I'm so glad that you are all here with me today at the first ever virtual Remodeling a New Home show, and that we get to work together on what it looks like to create a home that will make you happy. I'm Lauren Figueroa. I'm founder of Michigan-based interior design firm Lauren Figueroa Interior Design and Decor, and I'm thrilled to be able to walk with you through that process today. So since design is such a personal thing, I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about myself and about my work. I'm going to put the slides up here and share my screen with you. The tricky thing about this is that once I do that, I will no longer be able to see my dashboard here. So I'm hoping that once I push play, we just get going here and everything moves smoothly. So I will keep my messenger open with Derek here to make sure that all looks good. But anyways, let's move along here. I am originally from the east side of Michigan. I grew up in Metro Detroit and was introduced to the west side of the state when I attended college in Holland, Michigan. Then for the last 6 or so years, my husband and I have lived in Heritage Hill, Grand Rapids. And then just before Christmas, like so many others during this crazy COVID season, we decided to move to the east side to be a little closer to family. So now we find ourselves just outside of Clarkston, Michigan, in an 1847 farmhouse on 2 acres, which is just a tad different than living in downtown Grand Rapids, but we're loving it so far. So here are a few photos of my little family. This is my husband, Larry. He is currently a seminarian and also a fabulous piano teacher. And he does do virtual for any of you who are experiencing bored kiddos at home. Just a little plug there. And then our 2 pups, we've got Gabo here on the left and Ruby on the right. And as I mentioned, I own an interior design and decorating business. So my company focuses on mainly residential projects. So your bedrooms, living rooms, bathrooms, kitchens, new builds, etc. And we will take on small commercial projects once in a while, but we mainly focus on those residential spaces. And our motto here at LFID is don't spend another day in an uninspiring space. And it is my true deep belief that the spaces where we do life, whether that's work or home, any place where we spend time, these spaces impact our moods, our productivity, and our overall quality of life. So that said, on our team, we believe in thinking super strategically about the function of our client spaces, not just about the style or the look of it. And this helps us to develop and create homes that really lend themselves to our clients' specific needs. So often we'll see these beautiful image of spaces that we might call Pinterest perfect or Instagram worthy. But when you think about actually living life in these spaces, they might be super impractical for your stage of life. For example, if you have 2 young kids at home under the age of 6, you're probably not going to want a white linen sofa. As beautiful as that is, keeping it clean is going to drive you crazy. So thinking about function in connection with style allows us to create spaces that work with our clients rather than against them. And we all have our own ways of living and being in our spaces. And so in this session today, I want to lend you some insights into how we accomplish this by giving you a little peek into our design process, as well as by providing you with some hands-on tools for turning your own home into a place that will work for you. So before we jump into that first step, let's talk a little bit about this thing we call home. Home is the place where we spend time with our families. It's where we rest, recharge, feed ourselves. If you work outside of the house, it's the place that you retreat to after a long day of work. Or if you now work from your home, like so many of us now, it's also your place of work. And what I find is that for so many people, home is the opposite of a retreat. It's become a space of chaos, whether that's because you have kids at home, you're trying to keep up with laundry and dishes, or maybe you can't get a handle on how much stuff you have. Clutter, that's a huge one. Or maybe you're just exhausted from working a really demanding job that even the littlest task at home can feel huge. So, to reiterate my theory, if we intentionally rework our spaces, so that they lend themselves to whatever it is we need, whether that's rest or community or a low maintenance space that's easy to clean, rather than living in spaces that make our lives more difficult, we're going to find that home becomes a place of joy and happiness rather than a place of stress. And that's huge. So my session for you today is called 7 Steps to Creating a Home That Makes You Happy. And I emphasize that you because what makes you happy in a space isn't necessarily what makes the person down the road from you happy. Everyone has different values when it comes to spaces. For example, some people will embrace a very minimalistic style, which to them feels bright and clean and calm, where others might be what we would call maximalists, and they love a lot of stuff in their space, and that feels very cozy to them. Some people love lots of bright colors and bold patterns in their space, while others tend towards earthy neutral tones and textures. And so we're going to walk through some tools and exercises that will help you begin to explore what creating a home that makes you happy might look like. So first things first, there is a handy ebook that goes along with my session today, and you can download that right to your phone or computer. So if you go to the link up here on the slide, lfdesigns.co/ebook, and click on the button on the bottom that says Get My Free Copy. If you put your email in there and hit send, that ebook will go right to your inbox, and you can either follow along as we go, or even better, you can print it out later, work through the exercises, maybe as a great follow-up to that session. So again, that's lfdesigns.co/ebook. All right, so moving along, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the steps we're going to cover today. So first, we're going to talk about clutter control, why it's important to get a handle on the clutter before you start to design your space. And we're going to talk about discovering your style and why it's really helpful to know a little bit about your personal style before you take off on a design project. Then we'll talk about the importance of starting with a blank slate and why you should take everything out of the space before you get started. We'll ask ourselves, how will we use this space? Because that's going to inform what we're going to put into this space. And then for number 5, I'm going to give you just a handful of great practical tips and tricks that you can use to implement your space once you get started. Then once we know those tips and tricks, we're going to break the rules and play a little bit. And then once we've been able to go through those steps, we're going to be able to love our space because they will be designed with our needs in mind. So let's get started. As we head into step 1, I'm going to share a quote with you that I heard from a professional organizer. He was actually speaking at this very show the first year that I ever attended. And this is what he said. He said, "Don't ask what you want in your home, ask what you need from your home." I'm going to say that again because I think it's really important. Don't ask what you want in your home. Ask what you need from your home. That hit me so close to home. So often when I would think about these pretty things that I would want to have in my home, I wasn't really thinking about what I actually needed from my home or how I needed it to be giving back to me or working with me in order to make my life easier and more enjoyable. When we think strategically about what we need from our spaces, we get a hint about what to put into our spaces rather than just haphazardly putting in whatever comes along or just going out and buying that first piece that's on sale. And this also helps to prevent a buildup of unwanted items in your space. So how many of you know someone, or if you're willing to admit it, have a room in your house that looks like this? A little wild, right? Or how about a garage that looks like this? Ooh. Some of you feeling a little stressed out right now? Or how about a dining room that looks like this? Woo, that's a lot of stuff. So the point that I'm trying to make is that eliminating clutter is always the first step in creating a good design. Rooms full of clutter like these, rather than promoting rest and energy and community, they make you feel burdened. They prevent you from feeling at peace. They physically limit the number of people that you can have in a space. And maybe you don't even invite people over anymore because you're embarrassed about this space. So let's talk a little bit about the impacts of clutter on our lives. When you look at this photo, what are some of the things that you feel? Go ahead and type some of those thoughts into the chat so that everybody else can read those. But a few things that pop into my mind when I see this are stressed, overwhelmed, claustrophobic. Maybe you even have a physical reaction to this space. When I look at these images, I feel like I shouldn't move, or I might knock something over and it's all going to come crashing down on me. But these are all little details that reveal the negative impacts of clutter on our bodies and our minds. So like I said before, these spaces where we spend time, they have an impact on us both physically and emotionally. So let's do a little exercise that will help you start to think about making some space and clearing out some of that unnecessary clutter. So if you want to scribble down some notes on a spare piece of paper, or maybe use your notes app on your phone, what I want you to do is picture a room in your home that you might like to redesign. And draw a little table, and you're going to ask yourself, how does this room currently make me feel? How do I currently feel when I walk into this room? Maybe it makes you feel bored or stressed or uninspired. And just take a few minutes to jot down or think about how this room currently makes you feel. And then what I want you to do is ask yourself this question: how would you like to feel in that space? Maybe it's calm or joyful or playful or creative. It can be just a list of 3 to 4 things, but of course, don't limit yourself if you have a longer list. But how would you like to feel in this space? And what you're doing by creating this list of emotions of how you want to feel in the space is you're giving yourself some criteria for what is allowed to stay in your space and what has to go. So now what you can do is apply these guidelines to all of the physical items within your space. So any item in the room that doesn't align with that list of feelings that you just listed out doesn't get to stay in the space. You got to get rid of it. If your goal is to feel restful and you have an old pile of books that makes you feel stressed out, they got to go. If there's a lamp that was given to you by a friend and you only kept it because it was a gift and you didn't want to make them feel bad, if it doesn't match your criteria, it's got to go too. You should only keep things in your space that align with how you want to feel in that space. So work your way through your items in your room, and anything that doesn't align can either be discarded or sold or donated. So now that we have tackled clutter, it's time to introduce our next step. And I have a quote from one of my favorite design bloggers, Emily Henderson. And in her book, Styled, she says, trying to decorate your house before you understand your style would be like going on a trip to a secluded cabin without any address, directions, or GPS. Sure, you might eventually make it there, but not before some really terrifying things have happened. Most likely, you just give up. So, the point is, if you know what you're working towards, it's going to be way easier to get there. If you know what style you're going for, you can avoid purchasing pieces that don't really go together, or that you might never end up using. And this helps you save both time and money. It's all about that, having that plan. So, what if you have no idea what your style is? Well, I have a couple tools for you. And the first is something that I call the vibe test. So this is also in that ebook that I asked you to download. So you can always go back and revisit this and do it later, or revisit it again at a later date as your style begins to develop. So what you're going to do is draw a table with 2 columns. And on the left-hand side, I want you to name and list out some places that you absolutely love to be. Where do you enjoy spending time? So maybe it's a specific restaurant or a friend's house who has a really cozy style that you enjoy. Maybe it's a hotel you stayed at on vacation. Get creative. Museums, galleries, coffee shop. Maybe it's the place that you've missed most since COVID shut everything down. And once you have a handful of places in mind on the left-hand side, ask yourself what it might be about those spaces that you're drawn to. What are some of the design elements of those places that you like? Is it the colors that they used or the materials they used? Maybe it's the lighting or the style of the windows, the furniture layout, or even the overarching design style. Maybe it's modern or minimal. And so as you start to collect these observations about some of the environments you're drawn to, you'll gain some helpful insights about your personal style that you might never have thought about before. And this is a great exercise because it's always ongoing. Your personal style is always evolving and changing. So you can sort of casually collect these observations as you go throughout life. And maybe you even keep a style journal to keep track of some new and interesting elements that you find yourself drawn to. So that's the vibe test. Another great tool is, of course, Pinterest. So this tool has made our job as interior designers so much more streamlined because it puts all of the inspiration into one place. So for us, at the beginning of every project, we have our clients create a Pinterest board, and we then sit down with them and work through all of the images and talk about the style elements they're drawn to or not drawn to. And this is something that you can do yourself to get a sense of your own style. So what you're going to do is sit down, set aside maybe 15 minutes, and just start pinning spaces that you're drawn to. And really, they don't even have to be spaces, just images, artwork, a photo that has a feeling that you like, and just go with your gut and don't think about it too hard. And I'd say pin maybe 25 to 30 images. And then once you have your board created, take a break, give yourself a little bit of space for it, and don't look at it for maybe 2 or 3 days. Then when you come back and look at your board again, maybe you can draw out your style based on the common elements. So look through the images, and maybe every room that you pinned has dark wood flooring, and that wasn't something you ever thought you would be drawn to before. Or maybe there's a certain paint color utilized throughout them, or style of furniture that keeps coming up. So again, just go through those boards, pictures, what are the common elements, and you may find some surprising things about your personal style that you didn't realize you were drawn to. So those are just a couple of tools for beginning to understand your personal style, which again is very important before you take off on a design project. All right, so next up, step 3, this is a short step, but a very important one, and that is to take everything out of the space. That's what I said, take everything out of what is currently in your space so that you have a big empty space to work with. Why is this so important, you might ask? Doesn't that seem like a lot of work? Well, If you've ever taken a psychology class, you might remember a human tendency called fixation. And fixation is the inability to see a problem from a new perspective. So basically, if you're looking at your space with all of its current items in it, likely the way that it's been for a long time, it's going to be incredibly difficult for you to come up with a different, new, or creative way to use the space. Whereas an empty room is going to encourage you to think outside of the box of what you have done in the past. So grab a few friends, move that furniture out, and start with your beautiful blank slate of an empty room. So that's step 3, take everything out. Moving on to step 4, we're going to ask ourselves, how will we use this space? So this is the point at which we're getting into specifics about the function of the space. Because like we said before, thinking about how we actually desire to utilize this space is going to give us some insights into how we'll create it. So for example, if you're going to be doing a lot of writing in your space, you're going to want some place to write, a supportive place to sit, good lighting for your work area. If you will be meeting with clients, you're going to want some place for them to sit and a desk that's comfortable for more than one person to sit at. If you'll be hosting dinner parties, you'll want to think about the number of seats you'll need, tables for drinks, snacks, lighting, everything that's going to make the spaces function easy to carry out. So I have another exercise for you. Again, we're going to draw a table with 2 columns. And on the left-hand side, I want you to write down all the possible functions, all of the ways that you plan to use this space. And I would say, do it based on value. So if you think you might have like a guest come over once a year, I wouldn't design based around that. I would design based around how you intend to use the space on a regular basis. So any possible ways you'll use this space: reading, painting, working, hosting, teaching your kids from home. List all of those out on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, for every function you've listed out, I want you to list 1, 2, maybe 3 specific pieces of furniture or items that are going to help you accomplish that function. So back to the writing example, you'll probably want a desk, a chair, a lamp, something to store your materials in. The more specific you can be, the better. For example, you might just not want a chair. You might want a supportive chair that's easy to sit in for a long period of time. So that gives you some more guidelines. And so what you are doing here is essentially creating a very strategic and thoughtful shopping list for your space. One where every single item in the space has been intentionally put there to make your desired function for the space easy to carry out. Pretty cool, huh? All right, so now we're going to move on to step 5, which is tips and tricks. So there's not a lot of order to this section, but I'm going to just give you 9 quick, hands-on, practical tools to help you as you start to implement your design in your space. So first up, we have flow. So flow is basically the traffic patterns of your home or your space. How are people going to move through this space? So up on the screen, I am going to put one room, but laid out 4 different ways. And I'll just talk about some things to consider here. So the first thing is I always recommend floating furniture away from the walls. What's the first thing people do with their sofa when they put it in their space? They shove it up against a wall. But if you look at this bottom left example here, floating the sofa away from the wall created a really great walkway behind the sofa, which prevents somebody from having to cut through the conversation area in order to get to the other entrance of the room. If you can imagine maybe a TV above that fireplace, somebody wouldn't have to walk in front of somebody who's watching TV there. It just makes the flow of the room more efficient. And if your room is rather large, as in these examples, excuse me, floating the furniture away from the walls brings your conversation area a little bit closer together and makes your conversation distance more comfortable. So you're not like shouting across the room to have a conversation with somebody who's sitting with you. Another question to ask when considering the flow of the room is whether you need it to function as one large space, one single large space, or if you need to have areas, multiple smaller spaces within that larger room. So you can see in the top two examples that they have the space divided into both a living and a dining area, where the bottom two examples show one large living area. Some other things you might consider here would be the personality style or living style of the people living in your home. So if you have a family that loves to be together all the time and sort of like be loud and shout across the room, maybe more extroverted as a whole, you might want a space more like the top right option, where it's very open and connected. Those two spaces are very much flowing together. Sight lines are open. Someone could easily sit at the sofa and have a conversation with someone sitting at that dining table. But maybe your family needs more defined areas where separate activities could be happening at the same time and not interrupt each other. So if that's the case, you might consider a layout more like the top left, which is very much separated into the two areas. So the sofa and the sofa table here sort of act as a natural barrier. And here, two people could sit in the seating area and have a quiet conversation without disturbing somebody who's sitting at the table doing some homework. So just some food for thought about traffic patterns and the flow of spaces, thinking about the function and thinking about how you can efficiently move through those spaces. So next up, we're going to talk about utilizing your vertical space. So I have another quote here from interior designer Linda Floyd, and she says, "When you enter into a room, it should be like a cityscape, a combination of different heights. You never want everything in a room to be the same level or the same size. Accomplish this with different heights and sizes in your furnishings, art placement, and window treatment." So here I just have a couple examples that I'll talk through for you. So this is a living room space we designed up in Saugatuck, and you'll notice that every inch of our vertical space is really utilized nicely here. So from the floor, we have that nice layered rug on up to our furniture pieces. We have sort of a mid-sized chair and ottoman by the fireplace, some larger chairs, a bigger sofa. The shelves really draw your eye up, and you'll even notice the architecture with the peaked ceiling here really draws your eye right on up in this space. Another example here where your eye really moves around the space nicely. So again, we've layered a floor, a lower ottoman, taller sofa, taller lamp, and then even the trim of the windows really draws your eye right on up to the ceiling where we have those beautiful wood beams. So just another great example of utilizing that vertical space. All right, moving on, our next tip is about balance. So there are two overarching types of balance. We have symmetrical balance and asymmetrical balance. So symmetrical balance is created by repeating the same pieces on either side of a room or in a circular pattern. So in this example, we have the two identical sofas mirroring each other, the two chairs, the artwork, the bookshelves, the sconces, everything in this room is beautifully reflected on either side of the space. Another example here, the two sofas, the two chairs, again, a very symmetrical space. And you'll often see this kind of balance used in places like hotel lobbies, historic buildings, large traditional homes, spaces where the architecture is really symmetrical, really lends themselves to having symmetrical balance in the furniture and decor as well. Another thing is you'll also notice that it tends to have a little bit more of a formal feel to it. So you'll want to think about the kind of feeling that you want to have in your space, and if you want it to feel a little bit more formal and classy. Then we have asymmetrical balance. So this is achieved by using different pieces on either side of a space, but that have a similar visual weight. So if you look at this example, we'll start with the bookshelf and the piece of art. Visually, they fill a similar amount of space, and these two pieces sort of work to balance each other out, even though they're a little different from each other. And then with the dining table, we have the combination of these 3 lighter, taller, upholstered chairs in sort of a more organic shape, balanced out by this lower, heavier, solid wood bench on the opposite side. Again, they're different, but visually they kind of hold the same amount of weight. So if you take a look at the painting, if I were to take that away, you'll notice that the room sort of leans a little bit towards the bookshelf. It feels like it's not quite balanced there, but when you pop it back in, it feels nice and balanced again. So this is a great example of asymmetrical balance. This works really well in spaces where you just don't have the option for symmetry. Maybe you have like a quirky, long, narrow room, or something where doing something very symmetrical just won't work. I would say this is probably the most common because most spaces we're working with aren't perfectly symmetrical. So play around with using asymmetrical balance in your space. All right, next tip. This is all about coffee and end table heights. Real simple, but I find that it can be a really helpful piece of information for clients. So your end tables, you want to be of equal height to your armrest, within an inch or two, or where your armrest would be if your sofa or chair doesn't have an arm on it. And this is just a comfortable height for setting down a glass of water, picking up your glasses, reaching over to turn on a lamp. A very practical, comfortable height. And then for coffee tables, you want your height of your coffee table to be approximately the same height within an inch or two of your seat cushions. So again, easy to reach forward and pick something up, but it doesn't act as a barrier between you and whoever's sitting across from you. If it were much taller than that, it could feel like it's sort of separating the two of you rather than being in the same space together. Another quick example here, coffee table, same height as the seat cushions, and our side table, similar height to our armrest. This tip actually also applies to nightstands. So you want the height of your nightstand to be about the same height within an inch or two of your mattress. And again, it's all about that functionality. So being able to reach over and grab what you need easily, turn your lamp off before bed, all about that function. All right, next tip, we have the rule of thirds. So this is all about finding the right proportions when you are looking to accent, say, a larger item with a smaller item. So some examples would be like a coffee table to a sofa, artwork above a sofa, or the size of your sofa compared to your area rug. So I'm going to put a little diagram up on the screen here. So utilizing the rule of thirds, the smaller piece should be about 2/3 the length of the larger piece that it is accenting. So an example would be if you have a 6-foot long sofa, you want your artwork to fill about 2/3 of that space. So your artwork should be about 4 feet in length. And if you're using that same 6-foot sofa, you're going to want your area rug to be about 9 feet, 6 feet being 2/3 of 9 feet. So when you look at the staged version here, you can see that the pieces just feel like they're the right weight in relationship to each other. It's like a nicely stacked layer cake where no layer is too big or too small. So just a few examples here for you. This is a great application when you're talking artwork over a fireplace. So in this example, our artwork is nicely filling that 2/3 distance of the width of the fireplace. Another example here. This is highlighting the length of the sofa with the size of the area rug. So that rug feels like it's a good proportion to the length of that sofa there. And one more for you. This mirror above the sofa is filling about 2/3 the width of the sofa, and just feels like they're proportionately an appropriate scale to one another. Okay, so I have an example here in relation to this of artwork pieces that are just too small. When you look at these, you just say, that artwork cannot hold down the weight of the sofa underneath it. You'll also notice that these pictures are hung very high. So you want your artwork to be at a comfortable height for viewing, which is the purpose of artwork, to be viewed. So when hanging artwork on a wall, not above something else, I use what's called gallery height. So gallery height is considered to be average eye height of humans. I don't know if that's exactly correct, but so what you do is you hang your artwork at 58 inches from the floor to the center of your artwork, not to the top or to the bottom, but the center. So that puts the very middle of your artwork at eye level. However, when you're hanging something above a sofa, I generally find that gallery height is a little bit too high. So I'll usually use 6 inches from the top of the sofa to the bottom of the artwork or the mirror as a good rule of thumb for how high I'm going to hang it. And that helps the two pieces, the two elements, to stay together and feel like they're part of a larger vignette rather than being so separated from each other. All right, moving on. This is the rule of 3. So separate from the rule of thirds, the rule of 3 is what we'll talk about next. And so 3 is truly a designer's secret weapon. It's actually scientifically proven that odd numbers, specifically the number 3, are more pleasing to the human eye than even numbers, which is very interesting. So whenever you're styling your space, you can use groupings of 3 and you won't go wrong. So let's look at a few examples here. So I love this example here because they've utilized 3 different pieces. They're all the same kind of piece, so they're all vases, but they're different heights and they're different shapes and sizes, but they're tied together using a similar color palette. So that's just a really nice little vignette there. In this example, we have the tray, the book, and the little bell jar being the grouping of 3, but you'll also notice that within the tray, we have another grouping of 3 with the plant, the bowl, and the cup holders. Another example here, again, we have 3 items on a coffee table: plant, bowl, and book, which makes a great little vignette. And another tip here is to vary your sizes and shapes in those groupings, just to create a little more interest in the space. And then the last example I have here, this one's kind of fun because you'll notice, yes, we have the group of 3 hats on the wall, but if you look at the picture as a whole, we also have the group of hats, the desk, and the window sort of acting as a group of 3. So play around with your architectural details as well and see how you might be able to incorporate those into your styling. All right, next tip, we're going to talk a little bit about color. So there's 2 overarching categories of color. We have our warm colors and our cool colors. So our warm colors are going to be your yellows, reds, oranges, and your cool colors are your blues and your purples and your grays. And these 2 types of colors are said to impact our psychology in different ways. Warm colors are said to increase your appetite, evoke warm, comfortable feelings, increase your energy level. And cool colors help to promote calmness and meditation and focus. So if you think about a space like a spa, you probably aren't going to see bright orange walls. You'll see something more calming and cool. But then if you think about a space like McDonald's or Burger King, they want you to have energy and feel hungry, increase your appetite. So they've used those bright, warm colors. So again, you can think about your needs and functionality of the space when you're thinking about colors. A well-balanced space is going to have a healthy mix of the 2. These photos I have up on the screen, while they demonstrate the kinds of colors well, I would say either lean more heavily warm or more heavily cool. And I would prefer that each incorporated the other a little more. But when you're thinking about, say, your wall color, for example, something that's going to be very prominent in this space, warm color might be good for a kitchen or a dining room where there's people gathering and there's a lot of energy. And a cool color would be great for a bathroom or a bedroom when you want to be able to feel relaxed and at peace. So just a little bit about colors for you. Now we are going to talk about hanging curtains. So this is something that can make such a huge difference with so little effort. And so I'll throw a diagram up on the screen here. What people usually do, what I often see on the right-hand side, labeled as the don't option, is that people mount their hardware right to the top of the window and right to the edge of the trim of the window. But what this does is it actually makes your ceilings look shorter because it cuts that line off from that vertical line up to your ceiling. And it makes your windows look smaller. So this is what I recommend that you should do, which is over on the left-hand side, is take your hardware, if you have moderately height ceilings, take your hardware all the way up to the ceiling. If you have extremely high ceilings, I'd recommend maybe a foot above your window. And then outside of your window trim, mount the hardware 12 to 13 inches outside of the window so that you can just nicely frame the window with the trim exposed when your curtains are open. So this will also make your windows appear larger, and it won't block any of that much desired sunlight, which we as Michiganders know is so cherished. So think of it as like a nice hairdo. It should nicely frame your face, but not hide it. So that's what your curtains should do for your window. And then also just a little personal preference here, make sure that your curtains come all the way to the floor. So either they can just barely graze the floor, you can have them bent just a little bit, or if you want like a more romantic, whimsical feel, you can have them pool a little bit on the floor. So I have a few examples here. So this was kind of a fun example. We took our hardware on our windows up as high as we possibly could before the peak started in the ceiling, so that we could make our ceilings and our windows look as tall as possible. In this example, again, we took the hardware right up to the ceiling. This is a great example of the more pooling style curtains. You'll notice they're very long. It feels very romantic. Another little detail here that I think is fun is you'll notice the windows on the headboard wall are a different height than the windows on the wall beside it. But we chose to keep the height of our curtains the same to create sort of a cohesive look, add a little bit more drama to the headboard wall, which is very much a focal point, and just make it feel a little bit more cohesive. All right, moving on to my last tip in the tips and tricks section, how to pick the perfect pillow combination. Throw pillows are such an easy way to bring a little bit of style and fun to a space. This is also a great way to bring some pattern into a space if pattern normally is something that scares you a little bit. And so I'm going to give you sort of my fail-safe formula for selecting throw pillows and incorporating a little bit of pattern into your space. So what you're going to do is start with one kind of a bold pattern that goes well with your overall color scheme of your space. And then what you're going to do is pull a neutral out of that pattern or just out of your space in general, but do it in a really fun texture, similar to this like fuzzy fur pillow here. Maybe you can do a chunky wool, something like that. And then for your final pillow, you'll do just a solid pillow, but in a brighter color from that pattern. And what this does is it gives you some really nice variety in the way that your pillows look. They're guaranteed to go together, and there's absolutely no need to worry about whether one of your pillows is going to clash with the other. Now, if you want to get a little bit more funky and start to mix patterns, what I suggest here is to just vary the scale of your pattern. So you'll notice here we have a really tiny pattern with more of a medium-sized pattern. And what this does is it gives, it prevents the two patterns from sort of fighting with each other visually. You could even mix more patterns, just make sure you have like a small, a medium, and a large, and then maybe like a texture, and you should be good to go. All right, so step 6, now that we have some tools in our tool belt, we're gonna break the rules and play a little bit. So as the great Pablo Picasso says, learn the rules like a pro so that you can break them like an artist. So we have these tools, the rule of 3, the rule of thirds, how to mix patterns, how big a painting should be over our sofa. So you at least know the why behind how these design elements work. So if you want to break the rules, you can now do it with intention. So just a few examples here. I love these examples. They're, so if you think about the rule of thirds we talked about before about scale, these pieces of artwork are obviously way too big for the pieces that they're accenting above it or below it. But they've done it with intention. It's obvious that they wanted you to sort of stop, that these pieces are meant to create a big impact, and they really do that. In this example, we have sort of this teeny tiny piece of artwork over this bed, but it works with this space. It feels cozy, it feels quaint, it looks like it was done intentionally. And last up, this is sort of an example of doing oversized, large-scale pieces. So these lights are almost the same exact size as the table. And when you think about a mirror hanging over the table, again, this mirror is about the same size as the table. Those chairs are like so big, but it looks like it's done intentionally. It makes for a very beautiful design, even though they have broken some of the design rules. So finally, we're moving on to step 7. You have decluttered, you've planned, you've taken the time to think about your style and your needs before getting started. You've thought about your function of the space, and you now implemented like a pro because you have these great tools that you've learned today. So there is only one thing left for you to do, and that is to love your space because it has been designed exactly with you and your needs in mind. So with that, we will wrap up our session. I thank you for being such a great first virtual audience for me. I think we're going to do some question and answer here. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the comments or the chat. So do that. And then as you're doing that, if at this point you're sitting there thinking, Lauren, this is great information, but honestly, I can't even imagine myself doing this on my own. Design is my business. I do this for people each and every day. So please feel free to reach out. You can do that via our website, lfdesigns.co, which is up on the screen there. When you head to the site, there's a button in the top right. It says, tell us about your project. So you can tell us a little bit about your goals there, and then we'll reach out to talk about how we might be able to work together. So I am going to shift back to face view here and see if we have any questions. We say, appreciate the tips about draperies and curtains and the throw pillows. So needed. Yes, indeed. You are very welcome. I love that. Don't ask what you want, ask what you need. Brilliant. Agreed. All right, I don't see any questions popping up here, but I'll give it a few more seconds if you do have any questions. Yes, the seminar is timely, a timely reminder for me because we just moved to a new house. So I've had to do lots of planning for myself, which I don't often get to do. So that's been really fun. And I've definitely applied some of these tips here today. All right. Great advice. Thank you from Anna. Thanks for coming, Anna. Dawn says, want to go to another room. I'm not sure what that means. Do you feng shui? I can't say that I am educated in all of the ways of feng shui. I think some of that, I believe in it. And I think that it, for designers, often comes naturally. There'll be those times when we look at a space and we're just like, something isn't right. And then we'll change it and we'll know when it's right, but we might not know why. I think feng shui probably gives some of the answers to that. Derek says, great tips, Lauren. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Derek. Don, okay, Don is clarifying. The comment about going to another room was made when I was showing the very cluttered room at the beginning. Yes, I agree. I would want to go to another room as well. Jackie, you're very welcome. I'll hang around for maybe like 2 more minutes here. Melissa says, thank you. We're finishing our basement, so this is helpful as we design the space. You're so welcome. Good luck to you in your basement design. That's so great to have that extra space, especially now when we're spending so much time at home. Carolyn, I don't have questions, just appreciation. Thank you. Great to see you. Good to see you too, Carolyn. I wish I could have seen your face. Melissa says, we're designing for 2 teenagers for the basement remodel. So yeah, I imagine if you have 2 teenagers at home, they start getting older, they start taking up more space. Carolyn, I'm glad you can't see into my messy master bedroom office. Any tips for that kind of space? Melissa, do you have any specifics? I guess I would say, going back to when we're talking about function, what do you hope that they're going to be doing down there? Is it for watching movies or for studying? For, I don't know if they're having friends over right now with COVID, but yeah, I would just say think really thoroughly about how you hope they would use the space, or involve them in how they imagine they would use the space. And then do that exercise of listing out the functions and then listing out the elements that would help you. Okay, so pretty much for having friends over. Yeah, so maybe think about like minimum to max number of people that you want to feel comfortable in the space. So I think about that a lot. If it's like going to be another living room, we're going through this right now with our living room because I have a big family. So we've always had just like a sofa and 2 accent chairs, but there's never enough room for everybody. So this time around, we decided to get a sectional in addition to some accent chairs. Yeah, and if you're like wanting to be cozy, the kinds of lighting you're going to have down there, if they're going to be eating snacks, do they need spaces to set those? Helen says, will you talk about using live plants in a living space? I love to use live plants, but I won't throw shade on faux plants either, because I think it's all about what's going to make the space best for you. So for example, I've had clients who are extremely busy and like in the medical profession, and if they were to have a live plant, it would just be a source of stress because they wouldn't be able to take care of it. So in that case, I might recommend either like a very low maintenance plant, like a golden pothos, or I would just use faux plants. And then for real plants, I won't claim to be a plant expert, but like when I'm incorporating plants into client spaces, I'll typically work with like a local plant company. So the one that I've worked with the most is called Peace and Toil, but there's also the Plant Shop and plant parlor, I think, and a lot of those places will come in and do like plant consultations to sort of notate the kind of light that you have and like whether your air is dry or not, and they'll recommend plants that will do well in your space so that they don't become a source of stress. Melissa says they talked about making sure there was a counter big enough for 4 pizza boxes in their basement remodel. I like that. That's a good measurement tool. Cool. I got about 3 minutes here before the next session's going to start, so I'll give it a couple minutes. But I will say, as far as plants in my own space, because I'm not worried about my client spending a lot of money on a plant and having it die, I just sort of experiment. So especially over COVID, I think I kind of became a plant lady. I have a blog on it if you want to check it out, but just went crazy and bought a bunch of plants, and most of them are doing really well, but I did have to experiment with like which windows they were at and how much light they were getting and how much water. But they're one of my favorite design elements if you have the patience to utilize them in your space. I think they really pull the space together and they purify the air, which is good for you too. All right, well, I thank all of you for joining me. Thank you for the great comments and questions. And this session will be available after we go offline. So if you know anybody who would benefit from the things we talked about today, feel free to share it with them. And also check out some of the other great sessions and seminars that are going on via the project guide. So good luck to all of you. And thanks again for joining us here.